little spray.
Yeah.
Maybe
That was a little more challenge to get this on. All right, it's time for us to get started. So we'll start with the numerous announcements that I'll probably forget half of because that's how we roll. So we had a very short assignment over the weekend that's very useful to the TA and to me to be able to create our GitHubs and our Discords so that we can get those to you ahead of Wednesday, where the project will really start kicking into gear. In the meantime, we all read a chapter of the book over the weekend, hopefully, and those that didn't are now saying, wow, it's Monday already. And or, wait, announcements are posted for this class. I should probably check those every once in a while. Stuff like that. What else is going on? Plan for this week is to discuss that chapter today. Tomorrow, we are continuing our lecture on how software engineering has historically been done, transitioning into what is the modern best practice for software engineering. Where did it come from? Why are we doing it this way? What are the benefits we get from it? Wednesday, we're going to split lab in probably about half, where there will be a slight guided GitHub introduction, as well as I will show you the source that I find to be the most useful for learning Git. There will be an assignment. I have been told historically that I should make this an actual assignment and make people submit screenshots for it. I have not decided if I want to do that or not yet. Do I just trust that people are going to go through this and do it? I will probably have you submit some kind of congratulations screenshot from the end of sections of that. I'll go over the class's expectations for Git and GitHub use, as well as talk about Git flow, Git branching, exactly how to make your lives less of a living hell while you're using Git, because as those of you who have experience with it know, if you use it wrong, it is probably worse than not using it at all. So knowing how to use it correctly in ways that will save you time and make collaboration significantly more possible is very worth the time investment. We will also start talking about the project's requirements and go over how to design for the project. I anticipate that I would like to be able to meet with every group and talk to you about your design at some point. I don't know if that's going to be, we'll see how much time we have in that lab. It might be the following lab after things are a little bit underway. But I'd like to at least give you some feedback about an initial design, an initial thought process for how are we dividing up the work? How are we making sure that we're getting this done? How are we bringing it all together? But I need to make sure that I get through at the very least user stories, because you do not want to get too started and too far into this project without really thinking about the client language and creating user stories. Fall quarter is the worst quarter to teach this class for that reason. You start on a Wednesday, you start on a lab day, and then you have that lab. It'd be so much better. We're pushed back by half a week. And I had a little bit more time to do lecture. But talking about book chapter today. Anyone have questions on schedule, about anything else with the class before we get started on talking about debugging teams? All right, we'll dive into it. I have a series of discussion points that I made from reading the chapter. And I just want to kind of go through section by section of what that was and have a bit of a discussion on the takeaways from that, and also how we plan to apply that within the scope of this class, because I think that is very important in terms of just setting the tone of how are we going to be successful working together. Before we do that, I did mention that I wanted to, does anyone in here not have a group at the moment? Absolutely everyone is in a group and knows who they're working with. One person. Yeah, there we go. So I guess raise your hands if you're in a group of 5 again. There's just one left. Are we okay if we get a 6th member to make it fully, that way it's fully equal across the class? We actually have it divisible by 6 people in here, which is cool. That must mean there's exactly, what, 42?
It depends on how hard you're going to make a project.
Great, so that gives you a team to join. It would probably be better if we factored out 5, but I'm not gonna try to gut every single group. Everyone, jettison your least favorite person. I don't think that's not a great way to start humility, respect, and trust.
I freaking knew it. This is total drama.
I could make a reality show out of this class, and I'm pretty sure it would be the next big hit. Unfortunately, I'm not having you all sign NDAs. All right, so the first focus of the chapter was on kind of the focus on self versus focus on the team. How do you keep yourself happy while also working with a team? The first question I have for you is, how easy is it for you to control yourself? What you do, how you communicate, what you say, how much control over that do you have?
Ideally 100%.
Ideally 100%. Obviously, emotions get in the way sometimes. It can be challenging to have that, but yes, it is 100% in your control how you react and whether you've thought about or have set up blocks for yourself to recognize something like this is getting unhealthy. Rather than continuing to engage in this, maybe we should take some kind of additional outside perspective. Let's take a step back from this, come back to it at a later time. You have control of yourself and your interactions with your group. So any negativity in the group that stems from your interactions with the group is your responsibility. On the other hand, how easy is it to control your team? Can you control how other people in your team respond to what you say, to what you do, to how they engage with the group as a whole? Is that in your control or your responsibility?
If you're a team member, no.
Not really.
Yeah.
You're not a marionette working with the other members of your group. You're not manipulating them into place so that you get what you want. You have control of yourself and how you engage with your group. How do people react when you try to control them?
Not well.
Yeah, people don't like to be told what to do. They like to agree on what to do. So effective leadership is a very important part of being in a group, but how that's going to look in your group is dependent on who's in your group. What are they looking for? What do they need out of leadership? Are you the right person to be a leader in that group? What aspects of your strengths can you bring into the necessary leadership of your team? Everyone should be a leader in some capacity, but what that looks like is going to depend on the group that you're in. So I think that's an important first step in recognizing your place within your group. Next big section was insecurity. So I'm actually going to have people take just a second and brainstorm ways in which you manifest your own insecurities. You do not have to share this. You don't have to write them down, and it's not necessarily going to be public. But just think about that for a little bit. How do your insecurities come to light? That's an important thing to know about yourself, even if you don't go around wearing it on your shirt. But yeah, take a little bit and think about it. So I do want to state that I don't expect that people will share. I can share a little bit of my own within. I like to think that we're all in a big group when we're in a class together. I may be forced into taking a leadership role in that class, but I like to think of it as a collaborative atmosphere where my task is to make sure that the most cumulative learning as possible happens within the scope of that class. So in that way, you're all equals. I'm trying to target as many and as much as I can to make sure as much of that happens as possible. So a significant insecurity of mine that shows sometimes is when I don't get enough data or enough information to get a sense of how is that going. I end up asking a lot of questions or even self-doubting whether the curriculum that I've developed is effective. Is it targeting? Is this something that everyone knows? In which case, am I wasting everyone's time? Is it something that is so over everyone's head that they're too scared to talk to me and say, I have no idea what's going on. I'm so lost. They think that that is rude to do. And because of that atmosphere, I haven't built the right rapport with people to have you be able to come to me and talk to me about that. So if I'm asking a ton of questions or self-doubting that, it comes out in terms of, it may even sound or seem like I don't know what I'm doing, when I'm taking the best stab that I can, given that I have to take a stab at designing a curriculum that's going to work for as many people as possible over a quarter, when I don't necessarily know too many of you before the first day of class and what you're looking for, what you want to get out of this class, what your prior work history is, what you want to do for a career moving forward. With all of that data, I would have a bit better sense of what the best curriculum that I could design would be. I don't have control over that necessarily, so I can't worry about it, but I still do. Anyone have any concerns about working in a group? I would think that that would probably be something like the most kind of insecurity that might be worth sharing, getting out in the open so that we can discuss what are the difficulties working in a group. What are you scared of happening within your group so that we can address it for everyone, for every group, right from the beginning of a big group project? Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I get a little insecure that I talk too much, or like my ideas sometimes overpower the group.
Okay.
So how would you go about navigating feeling heard while still giving other people a chance to speak?
That's a great question. So yeah, especially if both of those are very important. It is very important for you to feel heard and for your ideas to be taken seriously. You don't want to feel like you can't share or you're not an important part of your group enough to be heard. But at the same time, there's a delicate balance, because as soon as you feel like you need to be heard, or that if you overdo that, then you can dominate the group. So finding that balance often has to do with communication. If it's something that you're concerned about, talk to the group about it and make sure that you can even try to take notes of how many ideas have I brought to the table? How many ideas have I heard or seen from the rest of my group? And even if you have a good idea that you want to share, if you're more of the I like to share my ideas kind of person, instead of starting by sharing the idea, start by asking a question that is related to the idea that you have, and see if someone else from the group comes up with a similar idea, and then engage with them in a way that it will feel to the other person like it was their idea. Maybe you took somewhat of a leadership role in steering the conversation toward that idea, but it starts to create a sense of community within your group in a way that everyone is generating ideas, everyone is feeling heard. And if it doesn't generate in exactly the same way that you would have, it creates a nice discussion point where maybe you learn something. Instead of just sharing and everyone is naturally agreeable to that idea, you hear it from someone else's perspective and can have a bit of a back and forth. Well, I haven't thought of it quite in that light, but I think that's really important that we should address. What about this idea? Let's have a discussion about how this group naturally fits together in that particular component. And yeah, everyone starts to feel heard. It's important to address it from the other side as well. If your ideas are not being heard, then see if you can take a step up, take a leadership role, get your ideas out there. If you are more of a natural leader, try to make sure that everyone is contributing to those ideas. Ask individual people who maybe aren't sharing as many ideas, what do you think about this? How would you design this? What are your ideas? Everyone should feel involved and included. Did that answer that reasonably? That was a great point. Anything else anyone wants to jump into? Yeah.
I have like some insecurities of my own, like coding / programming
Yeah.
skills. What should I do like about that? Should I go to my team members and or should I go to you for assistance about my insecurities in the program?
I think there's a significant depends on that. So this group project is designed for significant amounts of pair programming. And there are multiple levels that you can take. There are multiple roles you can take in that pair programming. You can be the one typing. You can be the one analyzing and designing. And just because you don't have as much practice programming, that does not mean that you aren't good at logical design. Even if you don't know how to translate that into code, that can become a discussion that you have with another person in your group. As you see how they convert that into code, you can learn about it. As you discuss that between yourselves, that is how that learning will naturally come to be. There's always something that everyone can contribute to that particular dynamic, I find. It's very rare to find someone who is just useless in a pair programming environment. I don't know if I've really ever seen that, except when someone doesn't have confidence in themselves and won't state their ideas. There's always relevant ideas and good ideas in there. Yeah.
It's also kind of off that point, it's also kind of important to recognize that if you're a more experienced programmer, you have an opportunity, I wouldn't require to say it's an obligation, but you have an opportunity to be helpful. Like,
Yeah.
And lean into that. And that is a huge role of being a team.
In psychology, there's a triangle of learning, if anyone has seen that, in terms of how well do you retain information depending on the learning environment that you are in. For instance, college is designed around lecture for which 10 to 20% of the material that's presented is actually retained, which is a great idea. But doing it yourself is something like 50% retention. Teaching others is about 90% retention. So even if you feel like you know something really well, and maybe the person you're pair programming with isn't contributing quite as much as you would like, the fact that you're in that leadership role and helping them to understand something that might be second nature to you, whether you realize it or not, you are grounding in those basic principles and allowing for faster recall, for better overall design in your own recall of these kinds of ideas when you have to do this in the future. So you are training and helping yourself when you do that. Not only are you helping someone else, you're helping yourself as well.
When it comes to like what historically has worked in the past when it comes to splitting the work up between group members, you say it's like heavily expected to pair program. But if we pair program, are we doing like 3 interfaces, like a sprint, or like, and then like, what is the best way to use things? I'm assuming the groups have total control.
Yes.
Which
yes.
makes this.
You will be dividing this up however you want. The way that I like to do this is instead of on the first day, this is how groups historically do this, especially in college. You decide on 8 big topics for this particular sprint, and you start to design, all right, these are the 2 smallest, we'll group those together and pass this to this person. Everyone has their own individual assignments and they want to come back to it together. My recommendation is figure out what all of the tasks are. Don't assign them at any particular time. Add them all to, we're going to talk about a Kanban board or a task list. And as you start, I'm ready to do something. Pick something from that task list. Work on it, find someone else to pair with, to work on it together. And that way, as a group, you're all responsible for getting everything done. But as you have the time, you can ask and figure out who is available right now. Who wants to get this particular task done with me? Let's go do that. And that way, it's more about the group than it is about did each individual person get their particular assignment done. College students are really bad at determining how long a particular task is going to take within the confines of a large project. You might think that it's going to be really easy, but it ends up being really difficult. And if the shyest, quietest person doesn't speak up about what they want until last, and they get shoved with the hardest thing that no one else wants, that's not fair to them, especially when the peer reviews come out the next week. They've been alone, struggling, having a hard time being able to ask for help. They haven't done as much. Their group reams on them for not doing much. It creates a poor group dynamic. Whereas if you think about it in terms of we all have to get all of these tasks done, as we have time, let's pair up, let's work on this together. That is a much more group cohesive effort toward getting a large scale project done. And then just at that point, make sure that you're aware of who's getting what done, who's working with me, who's working with someone. That's what all of your meeting logs will be for in your discords. Is actually making sure that you can go look at the meeting logs. Oh, this person worked for an hour and a half with this person, 2 hours with this person, but never with me. But I can see from the logs that they were active and engaged in getting something done for the project, and I can see it in the code that was submitted. Whether they wrote all of that code themselves or they learned from someone else who was taking a leadership role, they were still active and engaged in helping to get that code written. So I like to think of it from an outside perspective more so than from a, let's all divide this up and individualize. So that's how it interfaces with the group. If you find yourself consistently feeling like, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm always taking the back seat. I never have ideas about how to design this, how to implement this. That's when you want to come talk to me. And we can talk about in a lot more detail. What is your background? What is your experience? What can we do on the side to help get you more confident, more experienced, ready to take the next step? I am here for all of you if you ever feel like that. It's, from my perspective, my sole goal, not to judge, not to care about that individual history. It's just to help you do the best that you can moving forward. I do not care about the past, aside from the information that I need from that to be able to help you move forward. Anyone else want to add anything about that? That's close to what I want to cover for how challenging this is, but if anyone else has any other point that they want to bring up for themselves or that they've seen in past groups, I want to address it.
Something I'm really concerned about is scheduling.
Yeah.
Because typically all my other classes, how I have gotten things done is like, okay, once a week I'm going to pull an all-nighter and I'm going to do this at 3 a.m. But that doesn't seem like that's a good for working with others. So
yeah, you'll have to talk to your group and figure out, is there anyone else who lives like that? And if so, maybe you become best buds for the quarter and knock out some work, and that becomes your pair programming buddy for the quarter. But if not, there's probably something healthy, because that's not necessarily how work is going. If you go into software engineering for a career, you'll want to train yourself on skills of how do I schedule an interface with other people when there are other things going on. It's not going to be the only task that you're on working on this with this one person. There will be spread out tasks across different groups that you'll be responsible for. So how do you manage that? How do you find the time to work? It will be challenging, but I think it starts with communication, figuring out what other people's schedules are. What is the minimum overlap with yours? What concessions can you make? What concessions can they make to meet in the middle so that you still get stuff done? But that's true for all scheduling concerns as well. Let's make sure that you're communicating your schedule, communicating your constraints. If you have long work hours and only have some availability in the late evenings or very early mornings, whatever it is, you want to make sure that's public and known to your team so that they don't think or see this person is never around, this person is never available. I don't know what's going on with this person. Because that is a concern that will come out in peer reviews. And if you're not communicating it, then there's no way for them to read your mind. People understand things like work constraints. They understand as long as they know. It's only when it's unknown that it's scary and people make bad assumptions. Anything else I can address about that? Any other ideas? Kind of a big question here then, how do we just accept our faults? There's a lot of, either you're not as, a lot of students feel this way, you're not as experienced as you feel like the rest of the class is, but no one is actually shouting out, I don't know what I'm doing with regards to data structures. I didn't get much out of that class. No one's being very outgoing about what they're not so confident about in themselves as much. But we all have them. We all have faults. We all have some holes in our prior experience. How do we move forward with that? How are we okay with our place in this group that needs to do this project when you know you're not perfect?
Understanding that we're all just kind of bullshit.
Yeah, you all have different paths through this. People don't have to share your path and your struggles to be able to understand you. Recognizing that someone else's struggles, even if they're not struggles for you, are struggles to them based on their history, their experience. If you show them some compassion, then they might be more willing to show you some compassion when you display some fault that they don't see as a problem. You set that tone for your group that it's okay to not be perfect, but let's communicate it and work through it together to produce the best product that we can. That is much healthier than making other assumptions. All right. Anything else on that topic? Talk a little bit about individuals and teams. There was a section of the book that talked about idolizing individuals over teams. Why do we do that? Why do we think we do that?
Both was talking about it's more of a celebrity factor kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of a celebrity factor that celebrities are known as individuals. So we want to assign one person as being responsible for what a lot of people were. Anything else to add? Yeah,
It's easier to like look to one person to as like who's doing a lot of things than rather just look at it. And then
Yeah. The leader, the CEO, the president, the whatever. There's one person responsible for what is a large web of cause and effect.
It's also more of like a security thing, cause like when you idolize a person, like you kind of look at them and be like, this person is the GOAT. If they don't know it, why should I know it? And it kind
Sure.
of creates that environment where if like the idolized person doesn't know something, the rest of the group is just kind of like, you know, maybe it's not so important. If they don't know it, why am I ashamed of it? You know, like it creates that kind of environment where you can kind of shift blame, because at the end of the day, humans, we all don't really like admitting we're wrong.
Yeah. But it does also, at the end of the day, what humanizes us, because we all experience it. So when someone does do that, you're like, wow, I actually identify with that. I feel that. I don't express that, but I feel that. Benefits of working in teams. Why don't I split this up and just say, all right, we're each as individuals going to do a sixth of one of these projects.
That sounds great.
What's the benefit of working in a team at the end of the day, or as you were working?
We build relationships.
Yeah, you start to get to know people for future classes,
Build ideas.
Getting different perspectives.
different perspectives. It's really important to know that as well. Yeah.
Real jobs for him to actually work on teams, so.
Yeah, experience for how this is actually done in industry. Yep, 1, 2.
You're able to do a lot more together than either of you will be able to do on your own, like the sum of your.
Ideally,
collections more.
I've seen it go both ways, but yeah, if you, the reason we have these kinds of discussions early in the quarter is so that we take a healthier approach to working in a team, so that we actually actualize the benefits of working in a team, where you do more work than you could have if you worked individually. When you pair program, maybe I'll rephrase that. How much time do you spend when you're programming being stuck? How much of your work time is spent debugging, thinking about how to proceed, researching, not knowing what you're doing?
10 minutes, and then I email Art.
Yeah. It's usually a lot of time, and recognizing that in pairs, you spend a lot less time stuck. because there's another brain helping you out, finding what is responsible for that stuff. And it's really useful, especially during the learning process, for someone to live catch you as you make some kind of mistake, or as you say something that will lead you down some rabbit hole that ends in a roadblock. To have that correction in the moment, so you don't have to do a post-mortem of what happened when something doesn't work, and you're up until 3 a.m. trying to get something working the night before it's due. What else? One, yeah, 1 and 2.
Like one of the working in teams, people are so multifaceted that I feel like working in a team kind of like equalizes productivity and all across the board. Like the most productive person, and the least productive person over the whole scope of it, it's all kind of equalized as in terms of like, because everyone knows so many different things. This person who's maybe less productive in general is very productive in terms of maybe debugging, and maybe the dude who's super productive is actually makes a bunch of bugs, but he puts a ton of code down, you know, so.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I'd say both just the benefits of working with parallel programming when, oh, we're not all working on the same thing at once and everyone has a different solution to that same thing. It's like, oh, what do we pick? How do we deliberate this? It's like, no, everyone's kind of working with sections of the project and kind of come together on that instead.
There's a lot to learn just in communication of if someone else has done a part of the project that has to interface in some capacity with yours, how do you navigate that?
Learning how people like think, like learning how like if I know how someone else in my team is gonna think, then like I know what they're good at. It's like we can all split off into like the things that we're better at, and then you also learn. It's like finishing each other's sentences. Like when you when you work in a job, like you learn how to work with your teammates. So it's
Our
like,
differences make us stronger. The fact that we all have different experiences and different strengths means that we can tackle different parts of projects from our strengths, from what we're good at, and or what we can learn from if we're doing it in pairs. So it brings up our weaknesses, and it allows us, if everyone's working on something that is a strength and that's spread out throughout the requirements of the project, that is one way that you accomplish more than the sum of its parts. Another way is that when you go to interview in future positions, we'll talk about this when I have someone from the outside come in and talk about interviewing and hiring, that you're looking to hire people. You're looking to hire people with experiences working in groups and who have done this before. So being able to show a project where I worked on this component, pair programmed this component, code reviewed this component, I was involved in all of these parts of this project that came together and looks like this. Here it is. You can see it in its full working capacity. I know what I did individually, and it touched just about the entire project. I had these experiences working with these people. We had these issues. We overcame them in these ways. Interviewers will eat that up. That is what they are looking for. Someone who's had experiences, made mistakes, learned from them, can talk about them, and is ready to interface with a professional environment without doing it all from scratch. So that's what this class is trying to emulate and get you experience with, so that when you get into that interview situation, it's at least you can talk about anything they could ask about. Yes, it's in a simulated environment, but it's a step above people who have not done that before, or doing that from scratch, or coming in with a massive ego. I'm going to take over this project. I'm going to do it well, and it's going to go great. All right, how about the bus factor? What was the bus factor, and why is it relevant to this class? Yeah,
Basically, the amount of people you have working on a project can kind of determine, oh, if something goes wrong, someone's out, or if something's not understood correctly, it's broken. It's like, how many people does it take before this project's in trouble, that we need to figure out what we're doing?
yeah.
More people.
It relates to what I've heard is called the Swiss cheese model of failure. But the bus factor is how many people will need to be hit by a bus until the project is due. And the Swiss cheese model of failure is how many slices of Swiss cheese are in between you and total failure, because all it takes is a set of holes to line up to get all the way through. But theoretically, with the Swiss cheese, if you take n number of random slices, the holes aren't all line up.
Right.
Because each one is a line of defense between total failure and current state.
So if we divide the labor perfectly, I give 8 requirements and everyone takes 1, possibly 2 small components. And then one person gets COVID. That one person getting sick, if they're the only ones working on their component, can someone step in, read their code, figure out what they were doing, figure out what their design was, and be able to step in and finish it for them? You have a bus factor of 1 at that point. Any one person being taken out, it's difficult to get the work done or continue working on their chunk because they were doing it individually.
Is it more just like an idea too about like making sure that you communicate your ideas and you don't just like hold on to information that's
Yes.
conducive to the project? It's
Yeah.
more about like free thought and sharing with your team kind of openly.
It touches a lot of components of software engineering from design. If everyone is on board with the design, then we're all on the same page. If someone gets sick, even if they're working independently at that point, you refer back to a common design, and you can probably, with some work and wasted time, figure out what they were doing and be able to work on it somewhat the way that they were trying to work on it. If you're pair programming, then there are 2 people implementing any particular component. If you are pair programming with different people at different points, then you're aware of all of that. You're aware of everyone you're working with. If you're code reviewing, when someone has a portion of something done and before it comes into the project at all, you're looking at that code and saying, does this fit the style? Are there mistakes? What can I see? You're starting to read their code, figure out what they were doing. That is part of being aware of other parts of your project that maybe you didn't touch during its development, but now going through that process, you're a part of it. You know what's going on. So it can affect lots of different stages of that development. And we'll talk about all of these in a lot more detail as we introduce more. So we'll talk about exactly what's in a good code review. When should you do it? How frequently? Stuff like that. But just noting that the bus factor isn't just working in pairs, it's designing together. It's implementing together. It's reviewing other people's code. It's looking at the project every once in a while to understand its components and slotting in, all right, how does this implementation map to the design? Maybe there's a code refactor in there that we should be thinking about or doing because it's just a better implementation or it will scale better. All right, so I think that answers that. What's the ideal team size and what are the factors that determine an ideal team size? What do we experience if teams are too small or too large?
It has to do with like your working space and also like the job you're doing. I've read a book on this, but it's been a really long time. But there is like an actual like a critical mass that you can have, because if you have too many people, it's like having too many people in a kitchen in a restaurant. It's like you eventually have so many people that you're all just standing beside each other and no one can move and work.
Right.
So it's like you have to trim it down, but you have to do it in a way to where it's like logical.
Well, it's like you said last lecture, it's like every new person in your team is like, it's not just not just one connection. That person has to have a negative connection to every single person in the team. And all of a sudden, when you get to 10, 20 people, that's like insane amount of connections, communications, and conversations that need to be had.
Yeah. One of the challenges with being in a group of 6, sometimes when I teach this class, groups are size. There are arguments for the ideal team size is 4. Being in 6, that really is the cap. 7 would be too many. So I have a few concerns, and it's something for you to be thinking about as groups of how do you work in groups of 6? There's a lot of communication that's needed in groups that are this size. For certain ideas, maybe it's worth breaking it down into 3 and 3, 2 and 2 and 2. Something where you have kind of smaller groups that create components that come together in a multi-layered approach from that, so that you're acting or working in kind of smaller groups than just all 6 of you going your separate ways and coming back together. There's a lot that can go wrong in a group of 6.
Have you taught this class before?
Yes.
This way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is attempt 3 at Eastern, and I've taught it as in a semester-based system twice before this.
So what kind of issues do you run into with groups?
There's leadership concerns. I think if the leadership style just butts heads with what everyone wants from their leadership, that happened last year. I ended up moving leaders around between groups because leadership styles were just off in those groups, and it led to some people were trying to take over when other very intelligent people were not able to get their voices heard in terms of designing and implementing. There was too much overpower. There were other groups where there was a complete lack of a leader and everyone was just trying to be a follower in the same group, so nothing got done, and the things that did get done were done in haphazard, hacked together ways because no one was talking to each other. So you can see how the leaders from those groups would kind of need to swap a little bit, where someone who really wants to exert control needs to be in a group of followers who's going to, they need to learn to take a back seat first and foremost, but they weren't learning how to do that. So moving into a group where you can exert a bit more control on followers to see when does that work. But then I had a follow-up conversation with this individual to say, what worked in the second group that didn't work in the first group? Why? What can you learn from this about when you need to adapt your leadership style based on who you're surrounded by? Sometimes that approach works. Sometimes that approach doesn't. What questions do you need to ask to figure out what approach to take? So I feel like it was really important for that individual to have both of those experiences within the scope of the class. So leadership styles are important. Figuring out the frequency of communication. So starting early on building a plan for how to work together. What are our schedules? What is our workflow like? How frequently do we procrastinate? Be realistic about that in terms of procrastination does not work at all in a class where you need to write unit integration tests, test things before it is done. Many groups are up at 11:30 before a sprint is due at midnight, hacking together something to work before they merge it into their master branch. And that's a problem because things can go wrong even in terms of just getting things to the release branch 30 minutes before it's due. So as part of this, I try to make sure that the client meeting is done half a week before that. There's a lot of hesitation to gut and rework code. If the design is just not working, then it's time to refactor, re-engineer, re-implement even from the ground up. The size of the actual project is not huge. It's large, but each of those components, if they're designed well, is relatively simple. If you have an implementation that is simple, everything that I ask you to do will be so much easier than if the design is spaghetti. If you hold on to that spaghetti because it worked-ish, then your future work is going to be significantly more difficult. Off the top of my head, those are the difficulties that I've seen. There's communication and getting along. Oh, I guess one other, which is if someone is not contributing to the extent that you are expecting, don't set your very first peer review should mark them down for that. If you set the precedent that things are okay, they're going to get into a habit. I'm not going to have the data that I need to intervene until after the first sprint, partway through the second sprint. And at that point, they're going to say, well, why hasn't anything been said to date? Or I have been doing this. It becomes it was working up until this point when you were just giving them the benefit of the doubt to begin with. Err on the low side and let me curve up so that I see that you're not okay, even in just a small sample, unless they're communicating, I'm super busy this week. If they're communicating a concern, then maybe give them a bit more benefit of the doubt. But if every week, it's really busy this week. Yeah, but you got to get something done on the project at some point. You're a sixth of this group. So peer reviews are an incredibly important way to let me know about the health of your group so that I can intervene if necessary. All right, HRT, humility, respect, and trust. Why are those important in a group setting?
Without trust, you don't really have much. You can't work with someone that you don't trust.
Yeah.
You don't have
I see
humility,
that.
no one wants to work with you.
I've seen it in this class. I've seen issues with all three of these.
Basic. Human empathy.
Yeah. Human empathy, an important thing to try to do in this class. Yeah. Anything else?
Prevents egos from getting in the way.
Yep. Yep. Egos are a big problem. You're used to it being in charge of your code the way that you want. As soon as other people are involved in that, communication needs to happen. Need to come to a consensus on how that's going to move forward. Sorry, I'm rushing a little bit, given how little time we have left. But when is it okay to criticize another person? How should you handle criticizing another person?
Ideally, you start by telling them something they did well. And then you go on to be like, hey, but I think that maybe like this part, can you tell me like what you were thinking, like when you did this, you know, like you never just like start just like bashing someone.
Yeah.
You know, that's not it.
Yeah, yeah.
Like if some part of the code is wrong, don't tell them like, hey, this is wrong. Kind of turn into like, I'm the one understanding the code. Can you explain it to me?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal approach. Something, if they can generate the why behind the issue or the mistake, that's the necessary component to enact the change. It has to come from that person. So helping them to understand and to generate that for themselves, it's not, if possible, it's not on you to tell them, it's on you to help them to understand and generate it themselves. Yeah.
I think it's always okay to constructively criticize somebody, as long as you're reading the room, you know.
Yeah.
Person's, you know, their family member just died, and you just have to come in there with your criticism, even if it is constructive and you're talking about it in the right way, just read the room. But
Yeah.
also like, just like with approaching situations where you're being critical, but also have a desire to be helpful. I think that's a huge part of it. So
Yeah.
it's like desire to see it from the point of view of the project and not individuals. And you know, I want to be helpful because I care about the project. I don't care about you being all knowledgeable and telling you how it's done.
What if it's deadline day and there's a ton of time pressure associated? That's where things tend to break down a bit. When there is stress and pressure and there's not time to get them to generate it. This has to happen this way right now, or this project is not going to be submitted in a healthy form on time.
Well, picking your battles, like determining which points are like hills to die on. Like,
Yes.
like if your code logic that a partner makes is broken, just completely freaking broken, and you're hung up about how is it displayed to the user, how is it formatted? It's not really, you know what I mean? It's not
Yeah.
really an appropriate time, because like you got bigger fish to fry, like you gotta determine which fish are worth frying.
Yes. Yeah, it's important to pick your battles.
But it's also fair to be like, if maybe on the last day, it's time for you to start criticizing, maybe there's that's a sign that really you should have been actively doing it the whole time.
Yeah.
Instead of just choosing to do it right.
Yeah. That's a really humanistic way of looking at it. If this is an issue right now, what wasn't I seeing earlier? What can I learn from this so that I can be a better leader the next time some issue like this crops up? Last couple points, since we're basically out of time, healthy ways to handle criticism. Thinking about it in terms of, there's something for me to learn here. This person has a point, even if I don't agree with the way that they're telling it to me, rather than being defensive about what you did, think about what is their concern? How is that relevant? What can I learn from that?
Putting yourself in their shoes, maybe seeing what they're seeing, trying
Yes,
your best to
absolutely.
see what you didn't see before.
Yeah. Last thought was, what is a postmortem and what does it contain? It had the components, a summary, cause, damage assessment, action items to fix the problem, action items to prevent the event from reoccurring, and the lessons that you learned. I like to think of postmortems both being from the end of a project submission, but also from any concerns that you have with your group or with individual group mates. You can make a postmortem and even write out a postmortem for well, we didn't really submit this in time. We had some communication breakdowns, so there's kind of a person-centric postmortem and a code-centric postmortem that you can do at any particular point that I think helps everyone to be able to understand each other's perspective, listen to each other, find a way to move forward in a way that will hopefully be healthier the next time. Any last minute concerns, or hopefully this was helpful in terms of how to work together, even if this was complete and total review or something that you just agreed with. It's like I was planning to do this from the beginning. Hopefully having everyone on the same page with regards to that will help groups to be a bit healthier as we go through this process this quarter. All right, I will see you all tomorrow for a little bit more lecture. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.